The U.S. House of Representatives launched landmark hearings last week as Donald Trump became just the fourth president in U.S. history to be subject to an impeachment inquiry. This week promises even more fireworks as the Democrat-controlled House calls forward more government officials to testify, while Republicans feverishly defend the 45th American president from his potential ouster from office. How are the public hearings impacting the Trump presidency so far? And how might the inquiry influence the 2020 presidential election? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Professor John Gong of the University of International Business and Economics, and Anna Tangen, a current affairs commentator. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Welcome to Dialogue. John and Anna, first and foremost, do you think President Trump will be ousted from the Oval Office through the impeachment? Second question, will he be voted out of the office?
Well, I think I'm a little bit skeptical that he will be impeached out of office. As we all know that the Democrats need 20 votes from Republicans in the Senate to have enough votes to vote him out through the impeachment process. So I don't think they have the votes right now. I think the Republicans are going to defend him all the way because they don't have an alternative. Because if they abandon President Trump, they don't have a really alternative, a viable candidate who can run a presidential race at this point. So I think they're going to stick with him, as there always has been. The second question about whether he's going to win the election again, provided that he isn't going to be impeached out of his office, I think it's still very early to tell. I think it depends all on the swing states' performance. But one thing that's indicating the problems with Republicans is that in a series of gubernatorial races so far in state of Virginia and Kansas, looks like Republicans are losing votes. It's almost like a sweep for the Democrats so far. So I'm inclined to think there's some good news for Democrats. But also there are other polls indicating that he's going to win a landslide. I mean, these are the polls from the Republican side. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic that he will not be able to win back the White House again in 2020.
Yeah, but, right now it's 53-42 in terms of people who are in favor of the impeachment proceedings. You have a lot of very, very credible witnesses. These are not political people. These are people who have dedicated their life and careers to serving the United States. The Republican tactic of going after them and after the process has been mixed so far. Even when asked pointedly, Nunes, who is running the defense for Trump, about whether he agreed with this smear campaign that was waged against the former Ukrainian ambassador, he was speechless. He could not answer the question. So I think it'll be continue to attack the process, but they are running on very thin ground. At a certain point, when the polls start turning against Donald Trump, remember, he was not nice to a lot of these people. They might be willing to, in their minds, save the party and dump the Trump.
Then one of the minor points that John came up a couple of minutes back was there wouldn't be any viable alternative candidate to replace the presidency of Donald Trump in case he was to be impeached. What do you think of Vice President Pence?
That's a non-starter, because first off, if anything happens to Donald Trump, everybody around him is going to be tarred. If he were to resign, it's an admission of guilt. If he's voted out of office, who wants to say that his second in command is now worthy to take over? It was very interesting that it was Mike Pence's advisor who testified and said openly that what Donald Trump said on that phone call was highly inappropriate. She was promptly attacked by Donald Trump. Now, this is the first schism that you've seen between Trump and Pence. Pence has always been loyal. His people are very loyal to him. The question is, Pence so far has been silent about the attack on his very close long-term aide. So we'll have to see how Pence is shaping up. But don't think that there isn't anybody viable. Bill Weld, who was a popular governor of Massachusetts, is in fact in the race. Now, he represents the principles that were a part of the original Republican Party: small government, socially conservative. fiscally responsible. So it could be that you could see a run back to the traditional values, because without Trump, it is very hard to figure out exactly what the Republican Party stands for.
Well, it's very interesting to see the emerging schism between, or in the team of President Trump in the White House. As Anna said earlier, one of the closest assistants of Vice President Pence did say that the phone call was inappropriate. Now, that goes back to what happened during the case of Lewinsky, the impeachment of former President Bill Clinton. It's that the Democrats were well prepared to align themselves with their president that helped Bill survive the crisis of impeachment after Lewinsky broke out on the media. So what do you think of the issue of solidarity for Republicans this time around, particularly the Trump team in the Oval Office?
Well, this process is highly, highly partisan. I mean, look at the performance in the House. Almost all the Republicans are standing behind him right now, right? It's and they also, put out a show to humiliate Congressman Schiff. Read out a long document about, he did this, he did this. So I think, they're trying to find all kinds of tactics, basically, to tarnish this process.
That's very weak. It's very weak when the only thing you can do is not defend your president, but attack the people who are accusing him. That's like in a criminal trial when the defense lawyer is attacking the credibility of the prosecutor. How is that a real defense? The issue is, did he do it or not? Now, the difference between what Bill did is he was accused of covering up a relationship with an intern. That is a little bit different than asking another sovereign nation to interfere in the politics of the United States by mounting an investigation they don't even believe in order to score political points and get a $400 million payout.
Well, don't make me wrong. I'm totally in the camp of believing there's something wrong with this president. I think the testimony by David Holmes is very credible about that conversation between Sutherland and Trump in that restaurant. And the details of that conversation clearly indicates, I can't believe this can be made up. The details of this conversation clearly indicates that this is pro quo. I mean, this is soliciting help from the Ukraine government to interfere in the United States presidential election to target a election component. Opponent, I'm sorry. So I think there is credible evidence here. They're getting onto something, but really it doesn't matter. I mean, these people, the Republicans in the Congress, I mean, they're going to defend him no matter what. This is not really, I mean, the U.S. Congress is not a criminal trial. Okay, it's a political trial.
If the Lewinsky case and the impeachment of Bill Clinton were not convincing enough, let's go back earlier to Richard Nixon. In the early days of his presidency, he was able to enjoy very high approval rating, but 7 months of intensive media campaigns against him concerning investigation of the Watergate, the public opinions turned out to be loose sand, and he lost the popular support. This time around, let's come back to examine the public support for President Trump. The very steady 40-something% of the electorate who always show their consistent support for the presidency of Donald Trump. Do you think this core part of the electorate is likely to change their mind due to the media campaign, particularly the credibility of the congressional hearings that we...
No, I don't. I think you can peel off a small percentage, but let's get back to it. I was a former prosecutor and defense attorney. What I'm very interested is Ambassador Sunderland is now in a very difficult position because this will be he has to appear next week. This will be the second time he has to revise his testimony. In essence, he has perjured himself, and the question is why? Because he's now worried not only about the direct testimony of the aide who has overheard the conversation, but the other people at the table. If they were to be identified and forced to come forward and testify, he could be in trouble for perjury. He could suffer, and at that point, his only recourse to avoid jail would be to turn on the president and tell the full story if there is one.
That I agree.
That would be dynamite.
Yeah. But again, I want to emphasize that this is a political trial. It's really not a criminal trial. I mean, that's the...
It is a criminal trial to the extent that these people can be done in for perjury. I mean,
but not for the president. not for the president. I mean,
The president,
the
but
Republicans are still going to defend him.
if the people who testify, it becomes overwhelmingly clear that they're involved in a cover-up. Remember, both Nixon and Clinton were in the same position. It was always about the cover-up, not the underlying crime. So in this particular case, if the American public sees an ambassador who has to fall on his knees and say, yes, I lied to the American people in order to cover up a crime, all right, as part of some sort of deal to avoid going to jail, this would be political dynamite.
The cover-up so far have been mostly done by his aides. You know, the cover-up of moving the files to a separate server, for example. You know, all these things are done by his aides. The question is whether these aides are going to point to the direction of the president, whether he is under order.
Yes, but you have to understand, when you're building a case, what you do is you talk to everybody. You start getting a picture. Some will lie, some won't. But the point is that many people were involved in these conversations. If it becomes clear to many, even his aides, that if they lie and try to cover up, they will face the same things as Haldeman and Ehrlichman, and they will find themselves in jail.
Given the reputational costs and track record of President Trump, I'm still wondering why public opinions, despite the hearings, failed to shift their support, either for or against the president.
Well, this is the base you're referring to. This 40% of the American voters, these are mostly Republicans, doesn't matter what he does. They're always going to vote him. I mean, he's sort of a champion of their interests. These people are mostly white people in the Midwest. These people are working class people. And they think that President Trump represents his interest in a broader background of America is becoming browning, for example. Jobs are shifting offshore to Asia. And he stands up for their interests, keeping jobs, keeping manufacturing here in the United States, the tax reduction, all these cases against immigration, for example. This is the core interest of these people, and they're going to vote for him whatever, no matter what.
No, they won't vote for him no matter what, because if, in fact, the economy turns south, today, 2 of the largest coal-fired plants closed down. He had promised to make coal a #1 issue and to bring coal towns back, and they have not come back. He promised that the farmers were going to enjoy, a bounty. They're not feeling it. Some of them are going bankrupt. I don't know that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. So it's not going to be, he may get down to a core of 32% who support him. But that 32% is not enough to put him back in office.
It's the situation in these swing states. Instead of Wisconsin, I guess that's where you're from. Pennsylvania, what else? Ohio, I think? Michigan, yeah. These are the states, are the battlegrounds where the election will be decided.
Well, not only that, but new states are coming into. Texas, all right, has changed in the last 4 years. You're now starting to see Latino voters deciding that they don't like being called rapists and drug dealers. Even if it's not them and it's their relatives, they don't feel good about it. So the demographics are changing in America, and Donald Trump has not quite factored that in yet.
For the skeptical and the cynical international observers outside the United States, they are wondering whether the current investigation or congressional hearings are more a matter of entertainment tabloid stories or are they very serious political investigations? What would the Democrats get in return? Would this seriously hurt the image of Donald Trump? Storm Daniel, so on and so forth. I mean, this kind of stuff keep emerging all the time for the President of the United States. I mean, he's the most powerful man in the world. So what do you think of the tabloid version or serious probe?
Well, I think there's some element of truth in the theory that Democrats are doing this. It's going to be a prolonged process well into this election season. I think they're doing this to, first of all, if they can impeach him out, that would be great. If they can't, at least this show putting on in Washington right now is going to tarnish his reputation. They're clearly having the election in mind for next year. So I think,
But so far, reputation has only been compromised for elites and for the establishment, for the rednecks, for the white deplorables. They don't care, as you said earlier.
But they're going to keep discussing discovering new stuff. One testimony after another, new things are being discovered. So, as new information is coming out, I think American people, some American people at least, will change their mind, especially women voters in the suburbs. These sort of a middle ground Republicans probably shift their position. So, I think it really helps with the election.
But last time, 3 years ago, President Trump lost the popular vote for a wide margin, by a wide margin of 3 million. So to say nothing of the swing votes, what do you think of the prospects for him to win the next election 1 year from now?
Despite everything we've said and the seriousness of the charges involved, I think a lot of it depends on the economy. What you just said earlier, why aren't people, outraged? I mean, presidencies and congressmen, senators have been brought down by far, far less than the many things that Donald Trump has been involved in or accused of. So the issue comes down is there's this anti-elite feeling that's out there, and they're going to continue to hold that unless the economy goes south, if they don't have money in their pocket. And what's interesting, the numbers came out today, spending is lower than it was at the beginning of the year. It's at 3% increase. But the fact is that disposable income has gone up by, less than 2.5%. So at a certain point, your ability to spend goes away. Manufacturing is down 17 months in a straight row. This month was the largest drop in that 17 months. The American economy is slowing. If that hits, all right, and these already, you're starting to see the impact of the tariffs on there. So after Christmas, when people are looking to pay their credit card bills for what they had, they're going to find that they have less. And the question is, do they blame Donald Trump or not?
We've had a history of impeachment in the United States. Now, which one, Richard Nixon had to resign as a result of the impeachment. But can Anna and John tell us more about the mechanism of checks and balances through impeachment, through the supervisory role of the media and the opposition party? Because we're not just only interested in cigars and the Lewinsky, but more about, the federal papers, the checks and balances, I mean, the First Amendment, and so on and so forth. The Chinese, most of them who are educated in the West, are wondering if the democratic mechanism itself will be the first casualty.
Well, I don't think so. What you've had is Donald Trump in relation to his taxes and other crimes. He said that he has absolute immunity as a president. Now, that will not stand at the Supreme Court. There's no reason for them to believe that. There's no law in the books that says in the Constitution that the executive branch is immune. Quite to the opposite. Because of this checks and balance, it's the courts will decide the exact nature and power of this impeachment proceeding and what information they're entitled to. So remember, this could end up in the courts because the Congress could say, look, he lied, he is in contempt of Congress, he was covering this thing up, we demand that witnesses come forward. He denied us the ability to question them. That is contempt of Congress. That is something that could go to the Supreme Court. And as it stands, these conservative justices, they're the ones who are strict constructionists. They say that every single word in the Constitution is the truth, and you can't add or detract from it. They would be in a very difficult philosophical position to start making up laws in order to help out a president who appointed a couple of them.
Well, it's going to take a long time before the case was taken to the
But
the
question is, do the checks and balances work? And I think the framework
I think
is
it
still
works.
there.
I think the impeachment process is designed by the founding fathers to limit the power of the president. This process is precisely designed to tackle a president like President Trump, someone who is corrupted, someone who lies, someone who is doing things that are contrary to American interests. And I think this process
Accused.
Well, no, he's not convicted yet. Okay. Well, I think it's fair to say he lied. I mean, I'm pretty sure,
No, he does
The Washington Post documented
But lying
almost
is not a crime unless you're under oath.
18,000 lies from this guy, misleading statements from this guy. So I think, calling him a liar is not excessive at this point.
Are you guys suggesting in politics lying is just a practice of common sense?
No,
It's practical. Politicians tell lies because they want to get elected. If they told you the truth, you wouldn't elect them.
Let's look at how much impact will the impeachment inquiry have on the credibility of American Constitution? I mean, do you believe what's going on here amounts to a constitutional crisis, John?
No, not yet. I think this process is working. I think the fact that Congress calling for these witnesses from both parties in the government testifies to the fact that this process is working. I think the the Democrats in the Congress, no matter how much an attack from the Republicans, are still going to keep making these hearings, holding these hearings, and calling witnesses. I think democracy is indeed at work right now as we speak. So I don't think there's a constitutional crisis at this point, unless President Trump does something really, really crazy.
Remember, the original framers of the Constitution believed that it was not just the words they put in the Constitution, but the mettle of the people who would be enforcing these, the people in the Congress and the Senate, that they would be able to put aside partisan bickering in order to do the right thing for the American people. So the real question, the constitutional crisis comes if it becomes clear by any measure of the evidence that Donald Trump engaged in inappropriate high crimes and misdemeanors, all right, and the Senate refuses to act in an impartial manner, then you do have a kind of constitutional crisis because politics has overtaken the Constitution.
Now, what do you think of differences, if any, between Fox News and other, quote-unquote, fake news about the issue of impeachment?
Well, I think there's some crack in the Fox News these days. I mean, he's starting to criticize Fox News.
And their polls put him further behind
right.
than the polls of almost all the other stations.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, you can defend a person only to a certain extent. When you have, those mounting evidence pointing to the president that he really did something wrong, how can a news anchor really defend him? People even like, Sean Hannity, I guess. He's staunchest supporter, right? How can you speak for him when you have mounting evidence like this to the American people that this guy didn't commit a crime here? So I think it's going to be very difficult.
They've been very effectively using this idea that it's a massive conspiracy. Every time their talk points say that they've been trying to get rid of Donald Trump since he got elected. They're trying to steal the election. All of this is part of the rhetoric. But the reality is, and I agree with John, if the testimony is very clear and compelling, right, a lot of these people are going to be seeking cover. They're going to be, and they could quite viciously turn on Donald Trump and say, he betrayed me, he lied to me, I'm now against him. And if that happens, Donald Trump is officially dead.
Now, interestingly, on this note, he hasn't been treating his people very well, right? You have already seen some former government officials coming out turning against him. Right?
Bolton,
yeah, I'm waiting for his testimony. Actually.
Yeah, Bolton could literally, very because they can't say that he's a liberal or that he's part of some anti-Trumper things. He was brought in and very much on the conservative side. He carries a lot of weight with the neocon people. Yeah. So it'll be very hard to just say that this is a personal vendetta because I didn't let him get his way on North Korea. That will be said, but the fact is there's too much testimony, too much evidence, people on the inside who are corroborating everything that's happening here. And it's not one person with a blockbuster statement. Yeah. It's just piece by piece by piece. They're building a wall of credible witnesses and testimony that points only in one direction.
What do you think of the growing cynical sentiments of American voters? What do you think of the lower turnout for each election campaign? And do you think Americans are starting to feel tired about the repeat of partisan bickering across the aisle? It's too much of politics.
No, I disagree this time. I promise you, this time, 2020 presidential election, you're going to see a massive turnout. The Democrats mobilized all the resources to drive people out to vote. Last time, I think they...
No big deal. Last time, as I said earlier, President Trump lost by a margin of 3 million votes. Still, he won the office. He took the highest vote.
Well, I mean, I think this time it's going to be different.
The popular vote didn't count very much. If you look
well,
at
no, but you have to...
Well, go ahead, sorry.
He won because there was a new drive. There was an anger within in the heartland of America. These people showed up, people who had never voted for, and that's why the polls were wrong. They only canvass likely voters to see what they think. Now, today, it's exact opposite. Pew Research has done some surveys, and it shows quite clearly that the anger now is on the Democratic side. Yeah. Anger compels people to go to the polls. Yeah. Right now, there's not that same fire in the belly that there once was for Donald Trump. They still believe in him, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and I don't think American voters are really cynical about this. I think, look at the turnarounds in Virginia, instead of Virginia, in Philadelphia, in Kansas. The sweeping the votes in favor of Democrats. So I think people are not cynical about this. People are serious. I mean, there are really Republicans. They are shifting their positions and voting against this what President Trump stands for. I think there's an underlying
problem. It's not clear what he stands for. I mean, let us.
He doesn't stand for anything.
He's not a typical. I mean, $1 trillion added to the deficit each year that he's been in office. Yes, there has been record unemployment decreases and things like that. But beneath the surface, he is not the small government traditional Republican that everybody knows. And this really chafes on those, especially in politics, who believe that that is the principles of their party.
Let's put the issue of impeachment aside for a while. What do you think of the candidacy on the Democratic side? Who, for example, Michael Bloomberg or Joseph Biden or Andrew Yang? I mean, who are the strongest challengers who might pose a big threat to the prospects of Donald Trump winning the next election? Well,
that's a tough question. First of all, I'm going to write off Andrew Yang. I think he's kind of a marginal. He doesn't get a chance at all. I think among the remaining candidates, Elizabeth Warren has a chance. Bernie Sanders has a chance. But the problem is these two candidates, I don't think they have a chance to win over President Trump, because they represent kind of extreme side of a Democrat side, more of a socialist point of view. I still hope that Biden can still has a chance to face the president. The problem is that this whole process also damages him as well, because he's a son, right, at the center of this controversy. I still believe that Joe Biden's a good candidate. He still has a chance to, if he has a chance
but
to...
But he's too old, I'm afraid.
But he doesn't act old. He doesn't act old. I think,
he talks slowly, he acts clumsily.
Well, he's in good shape. I think he's in good shape. I don't believe
he's had some mental lapses. There's been some, yes.
Better than Sanders. Better than Sanders.
But right now, Buttigieg is experiencing, at least in the polls in Iowa and places like that, a resurgence, because the last couple of governor's elections have made it very clear that a centrist Democrat is what people want to vote for. They do not want a fringe candidate. So to the extent that he represents it, that is Bloomberg, that is Buttigieg, and you have the governor of Massachusetts, who's also who's also weighing in. So you're seeing these kind of middle-of-the-road people with experience in running things who are going out. Buttigieg is a little bit of an outlier in the sense that running South Bend, Indiana is not the same as running the United States.
Is Michael Bloomberg too late to join the race at this point?
No, what he's done is tactically he's going to skip over the New Hampshire, Iowa circus. He's going right into what they call the Super Tuesday. This is a huge pile of votes that come out of this massive turnout. If he can come out of that, number one, he's probably assured of getting the apprentice. Now, he has no problem with money. Expect
10 times as rich as President Trump.
But expect his message to be out there. The others are having problems with their money, and if you don't have the money, you can't get the message out.
Well, it's more about perhaps a votage instead of votes in the presidential election. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.